When you're an entrepreneur and you start something, every day you're open, you lose money. So that was the strategic plan, and we sent that out to sort of everybody we knew, and we waited for the phone to ring, and it didn't ring. We must have sent out 500, hey, we're in business, and we're well-known guys, and let us represent you, and nobody hired us. So this is a very depressing moment. So I said to my partner after we called everybody and nobody hired us, I said, what do we do now? We had a secretary between the two of us. I didn't get her because I was the junior person. I'd answer the front door, for God's sakes. Actually, I'm from Philadelphia, born in Northeast Philadelphia, and then we moved to the suburbs, to Abington, Pennsylvania. Actually, we had about 900 kids in a class, 930 or 940. So it was a small, intimate experience. I went to Yale after that, and then to Harvard Business School. I joined Lehman in 1972. It was really interesting. It was a completely different world than we had now. I mean, the whole corporate finance department of Lehman, that was probably the number 3 firm at that time, was 40 people. It's hard to imagine. It was great for learning because we didn't have what people have now, which are specialists. Everybody's a specialist at something. And we were all just generalists. So if you were in corporate finance, you did literally every type of activity, from rating agency presentations to private placements to equity offerings, debt offerings, mergers. Anything that somebody needed, you did it. And I think that was a really important element of my career, because you sort of knew something about everything. And that way you could sense trends and changes and so forth. And Lehman, for a variety of reasons, ended up in an out-of-control situation where, we had some very large trading losses, and I sold the firm. I guess I was 35 at that time, to American Express Company, and then I left a year later and started Blackstone.
So when you started Blackstone after 13 years at Lehman, 1985, the path of least resistance would have been to start another great investment bank. Yet you didn't do that. You went into investment management. What was the reasoning?
Well, what we did is we tried to figure out what could we do that everybody else in the world wasn't doing. And that's like an important way to think, not just try and be better at what everybody else is doing. So we actually spent, and this might be an interesting sort of lesson for you, we spent 3 months, just the two of us, meeting for breakfast every day. And this was the breakfast that lasted 3 hours, trying to figure out why we were going into business. What were we offering? So the strategic plan we came up with was first to go into the corporate advisory business, which is what we had been in. We knew a lot of people, and I finished up as head of the merger department at Lehman, and we had, at that point, the most active merger department. So that required no capital. It's always good to not need capital, because then you don't have to dilute your ownership. So we did that, and then as part of this strategic plan, the second piece was to go into what was called then leverage buyouts. And a lot of my friends were the young people who were starting the other firms at that time, whether it was KKR, Forsman Little. We were all within 5 years of each other, and these people had trouble getting anybody in the investment banking business to represent them, because they were very small companies and they had leveraged structures, and it seemed all risky. And because I knew them, I took them on as clients. And there was one very significant deal, which, if you study these things, it was called Hudai, which was about, I think, from memory, somewhere in the $300 and some odd million, which laid out the whole structure of what was then, sort of a secretive type of thing called leverage buyouts, and you looked at it, and it was like an amazing way to make money, just amazing. And so I knew I wanted to do that. I tried to get Lehman to start that, and we actually got a deal, and it was turned down by the management committee, which is one reason why they ended up broke. There weren't always, great decision makers in my view. And the third part of our strategy is because finance was going through this amazing, sort of consolidation after May Day in 1975, when commissions had basically been fixed for, I guess, 200 years. And it led to a lot of different popcorn stands with highly inefficient, sort of cost structures. And those companies started combining, and it became very clear that there was going to be massive increase in the size of firms. So when I joined Lehman, we had about 550 people. When Lehman died, sort of in 25 years later or whatever, it had 30,000. So I don't know what the compound rate of return is, but I'll tell you one thing. When I was at Lehman, I knew everybody by sight, a lot of people by name. When you got a firm that's 30,000 people, it's a veritable impossibility. And I thought that strategically, there were a lot of people who like to be in smaller sized organizations. And what we should do is recruit those people when we saw an amazing opportunity, a market shift, something unusual happening, and that people who were 10s on a scale of 10 would be available simply because they just didn't want to work in these ever consolidating big firms that became impersonal. And that if we could start those businesses and have them generate intellectual capital, which we could use to make our existing businesses stronger, then we'd have like a great business. So that was the strategic plan, and we sent that out to sort of everybody we knew, and we waited for the phone to ring, and it didn't ring. Didn't ring. And so we must have sent out 500, hey, we're in business, and we're well-known guys, and let us represent you, and nobody hired us. So this is a very depressing moment for those who are starting things. So I said to my partner after we called everybody and nobody hired us, I said, what do we do now? He said, wait 2 weeks and call them all again. Maybe we'll get lucky. And we did get lucky. We had a company called Squibb, which was a pharma company, hired us for $50,000. I've never been more grateful for $50,000, because when you're an entrepreneur and you start something, we had $400,000 of capital. That what happens is every day you're open, you lose money. You pay the rent. We had sort of a secretary between the two of us. I didn't get her because I was the junior person. And, I had no secretary for a year and a half. I'd answer the front door, for God's sakes. And it was a real change. Now, that 400,000, by the time I guess it was like last summer, when the markets went down, it's like $52 billion. So that sounds like a good trip. But the journeys are always much rougher than people imagine. But the strategic plan of the firm never changed. It's still a great plan, and we're still executing on it, endlessly creating new things. But they got to be great. The opportunities got to be fantastic for the customers.